With some diligence, I feel, and just with some understanding and even a little bit of empathy, it can go a long way. Getting the results that you're looking for, that you need to be able to keep going.
Hello, my name is Jason Reichl, and you're listening to Risk Management Brick by Brick. I'm fascinated with people who are helping build and maintain the physical world around us. On each episode of this podcast, we'll dive in with a risk manager, speak to them about how technology plays a role in this process.
Hello, Melissa. Thank you for joining me today on Brick by Brick. I'm so excited to have you. We've been trying to get you for a few weeks and we've been missing each other. So thank you for joining me in the office today.
Thank you for having me.
So Melissa, one thing that we'd like to start off with is a little bit about your story. I mean, you really have a fascinating tale in insurance. You've kind of done a little bit of everything. So I'm just really excited to get the listeners to hear about your background and what you're doing today.
I've been in the industry for almost 25 years now, and I specifically focused on risk management for the last 15 or so with a specialization in captives. But yeah, I've done a little bit of everything. I've worked for a carrier. I've worked for a TPA. I've been in-house corporate risk management. I've dabbled in brokerage and underwriting. So I've touched a lot of different parts of the industry, but I feel like I really found my niche with risk management and specifically with captives. That's where my passion lies and what I like to do the most. So I'm very fortunate that I've had the trajectory that I've had in this career because like a lot of my peers, we didn't plan on it. We didn't plan on having a career in insurance, and that's okay. I like to tell people, I didn't stumble into this. I evolved into it because I had a really great job in college that turned into a phenomenal career, so I'm just very happy that it turned out the way that it has.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we're starting to see it more and more on the podcast, but most of the senior people in risk management didn't go to college, didn't thrive to be in risk management. It's sort of a career where their curiosity and their desire to learn how businesses work kind of drove them. What kind of core attributes do you think you brought to the table that really allowed you to thrive in risk management?
I'm a very much a check the box type person. I just like to get things done. And when I don't, I just feel so unproductive and underutilized and unhappy. And just going back to the point that you brought up, a lot of people that, came into risk management, we didn't have all of these programs in risk management and insurance when I was coming up 25 years ago and in school and getting my degrees. You see them everywhere now, but it wasn't a popular choice. It wasn't something that you could major in. A lot of us are, we learned on the job, and I'm one of those people. My undergrad degree is in history. So it's just me being the type of person that I am. I love to read. I love to write. I love to figure things out. I love to just research things. And so it just works very well for my personality.
Melissa, I've been following you for a while, and it really seems like there's two passions you have. And you mentioned one of them, which is the captive. But I was reading your article around breaking the captive glass ceiling, and you said, if you find talking about gender and race uncomfortable, imagine living it. And that really spoke to me and the kind of things that I think that sometimes in the insurance world, mental health, diversity, those kind of things that we're not really willing to talk about when obviously, most people in insurance look more like me than look like you. Can you go into that a little bit? Can you talk about sort of where that passion came up and then how you're trying to further that in the insurance industry?
Sure. And I've had a phenomenal response from that one comment that I made all those months ago during a diversity panel that I moderated. And I'm the type of person, I don't like being told no. And so when someone tells me no, I dig my heels in even more, sometimes to my own detriment, because I don't like to give up. It's just a core part of who I am. So coming into this industry, especially as a young woman of color, I already came in, I hate to say it this way, but this is how it felt with two strikes. And so I had to work harder. I had to be better. And there were so many times I would walk into the room and I would be the only woman and the only person of color, So when you walk into a room of nothing but this, you have to make sure you're on your P's and Q's. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, you have to cross all your T's and dot all your I's, because you can be, and a lot of times will be judged more harshly just because people want to challenge you. They want to know what you know and why do you belong here. And I know you're going to ask me this question later, but this fits in very well. It's some of the best advice that I got, and this came from my dad, was that you belong in every single room you walk into. And so that gave me a lot of confidence to say, because I am capable, and I don't have to prove myself to you. I'm here because I belong here. And that just resonated with me and has really propelled me and my career to the point where I am now. And I just love that, I leaned into it instead of shying away and running away and being afraid. I just took it and ran with it.
At RIMS, I was talking to a young group of up and coming risk managers, people thinking that they're going to go into the insurance industry. And one of the questions that they asked me, which I'm interested to get your take on it, is how do you interview with organizations and help uncover maybe some of the bias or the organizational culture that's there when you're talking to some different organizations? Like, what techniques have you learned to find the organizations where you feel the most supported and you feel they're interested in supporting and furthering the cause of making their organization diverse in the very beginning?
I will be 100% honest with you. I bring it up. I bring it up in the interview. If they don't talk about it, if they don't bring it up, then I will. And I research, I look at their websites, I look at their initiatives that they have. And if DEI is one of them, then your organization that I'm going to want to speak to, and I'm going to call you on what your initiatives are and how you're benchmarking that progress. And people treat diversity sometimes like it's just a buzzword. And it's just something that, okay, I did this, I checked the box. That's not okay. I've been a token before. I'm not going to check a box for you. I need this team, to be diverse, because that diversity of thought is what makes you better. It helps your bottom line. It helps the organization, has an impact on your communities. People can say it all day long. We're diverse and we do this and we do that. Okay, what steps are you taking to make sure you are bringing on that diverse talent? As you know, we have a talent gap right now in our industry, and it is a huge gap, so we really need to make efforts to bring in some of that young, diverse talent to be able to carry on what we've been doing.
I don't share the same sentiment, but I brought this up several times with different CX level people within organizations about this. And they go, we would love to hire more people of color or have more diversity, but we can't find the talent of XYZ. And they use that as an excuse to continue the same practices they've always sort of been part of. And I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that they really do believe that, but they don't understand how they are closing doors behind them. We face this in the tech industry too, in hiring, right? There are no good African-American women engineers. It's like, that's not true. They're just not in the same pools that you consistently maybe hire from or source from.
That's exactly right. We have to change where we're pulling from and how we're recruiting our talent into the industry. And there has to be an effort up top in the C-suite. They have to actually believe in it and make the effort to do it. And so the ones that say that there's plenty. There really is plenty. They're just not looking in the right places. That's really what it is.
And then on the reverse side, sometimes I'm speaking to people of color, women, anyone that falls in that diverse subset of individuals. And they're almost protective because they've had to come up in organizations that didn't have these programs. And maybe they had to show themselves, put themselves in uncomfortable positions over and over again. They have that same expectation of other people in the same segment as them having to go through that same thing. I studied feminism in college. And one of the things is, we all become prisoners of the systems that we create. And then we also all benefit from it. But if we really want to change it, we all have to have an open mind about the ways of building career paths for everyone.
That's right. Yeah, I don't believe in that. I mean, this is our industry and we have to take care of it for the future. And I'm not territorial in that way, so if there's somebody coming behind me, this is why I'm a mentor with RIMS. If there's somebody coming behind me that looks like me, I'm going to pull them along and I'm going to get them. Yes, it was hard for me, and it still can be very hard. Sometimes there's a lot of passive aggressiveness that I deal with and egos, and there's just things that are, I guess, is unconscious bias that I can say that happens that people don't really think about because it's unconscious, right? But I still have to deal with those things. So I want to make it easier for those coming behind me. I'm not going to sit here and close doors. I want those doors to be wide open and for them to burst through and for them to do the same with those coming behind them. I mean, that's the way we should be doing it.
Melissa, I don't want to just have a podcast where I just talk to you about diversity. I know that you're so much more than just promoting the idea in the industry, but I really appreciate the work you do there. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about captives and sort of as a risk manager, why does captives make so much sense? And how can you push your organization into or get them to start thinking about how captives could be a good way for you to go with your insurance needs?
Yeah, and so I think people have seen a tremendous amount, especially because of COVID and the hard market cycles that we've been dealing with cyber and property and AI is burgeoning. And there's just things that these climate change losses and things that are happening. Then people are just tired of paying these exorbitant premiums. And so captives, Dan Toll, he's the president of Seeker, said this is the golden age of captives. And I really and truly believe that because when I started, captives were nowhere near as talked about and desired as they are. And I have so many colleagues and so many peers that just don't have enough time in their day because there's so many of their clients and their clients' friends that are coming and saying, yeah, I want to know more about captives. It's just, it works. It really works if it's set up right, if you have the funding, because we know it does cost some money because you have to have money to pay reserves and everything else. But, if you have a dedicated team, your vendors, your captive manager, your actuary, your corporate attorney, like everybody, if you have a group of dedicated folks and you have the buy-in from your C-suite, you can make it work. It may take some convincing. It may take a lot of meetings because there's still a lot of people who don't understand what captives are. They're so used to that traditional insurance commercial market, and that's all that they know. So education is a big part of it. That's a big part of what I do. I didn't think I'd be putting on this many classes and holding this many training sessions about captives, but here we are. And it's okay. There's a reason for it, and it's a means to an end. Let me put it that way.
I find that captives to risk managers are a way to transform your organization's view of risk management being just this checking of the boxes, this Peter to your project status, all of these things that risk managers sometimes must do. You must stop and make sure that this thing is going well sometimes. But it creates a revenue stream for the organization if you have good practices. And that seems to be very interesting in the way we can go in the future.
That's absolutely right. I mean, turning your captive into a profit center, which is something that I've done before, is the best feeling in the world. I used to love writing those dividend checks to my stakeholders, when we had our annual meetings because, hey, look, this is what you did. Your investment has turned into this. And obviously, it wasn't just them, it was me as well with the loss control and the claims mitigation and everything else that goes into it. But they gave me the wherewithal to be able to make it happen. So that's what I really enjoy the most about it. It's a very satisfying feeling.
Do you have specific industries or specific kinds of companies that you think should be looking into captives that maybe aren't looking into captives right now or emerging?
Oh, that's a great question. I think trucking and fleet has kind of taken off a lot recently. And that's a big one that really needs to take just because I think it just goes without saying. I mean, it's just the risk and the liability tied into it is just tremendous. And you have, all these, I hate to say it this way, ambulance chasing lawyers that are always looking. And on top of that, these nuclear verdicts are making everything, social inflation is just making everything more expensive. So I think that's a big one that needs to be looking at this. Construction is another big one. I mean, that's, in real estate companies, that type of thing. I think those are some of the bigger ones. And also tech companies. I mean, cyber it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse as we go along here. So tech companies should really take a look at captive because it's going to help their bottom line.
One thing I know you're really plugged into RIMS and other things. What's some of the other stuff that you see for coming in the next couple of years that you really think, this is always the default AI question, but what other technologies or processes are you sort of putting your finger on and going, oh, this is going to be interesting. This might be something that can kind of change the game or create more clarity and transparency, which is what I think every risk manager really is after.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, besides AI, just InsurTech in general, I think, especially on the brokerage side, there's still a lot of antiquated ways that they go and get coverage from the market that they could really kind of speed up and do better with. There just needs to be a more streamlined process. And I think, some of these InsurTech companies that I've seen that are coming up and coming through with these game-changing ways of getting coverage bound is really going to make a risk manager's life, such as myself, is going to make it a lot easier. So I'm hoping to see some of those come through because, we know how pivotal insurance renewals are for an organization. So I'd like to see more of that.
A lot of the data, as a CRO of an InsurTech, a lot of the data we create could go straight into helping your broker put your best foot forward, right? Yet we're still seeing brokers' resistance to using data that shows that you have run a good program to negotiate against the carriers. And I don't have anything against brokers. I think there are a lot of good brokers who really advocate for their clients. But it's really hard when you're running, say, a really good risk transfer program and you're showing that you're running a really good risk transfer program. And then you get hit with the same annual premium that you do every single year. And you've invested as a risk manager in technology. You're paying $20,000 a year for that technology or whatever it turns out to be. So I'm still finding that what the insurtechs can provide, risk managers are hungry for, and even CFOs and the exec teams are hungry for. But getting that to work into the insurance wheel has been one of the biggest challenges because the brokers have to keep a lot of people happy, right?
That's absolutely right. And some of them are just kind of set in their ways, let's be honest, and they do things the way that they always have done. I mean, but I'm the type of person embracing change is the only way you're going to survive. I mean, I remember once upon a time, my broker and my captive manager, I wasn't getting the most streamlined and efficient program possible. So I put them both in a room and I said, figure this out, or I'm going to find a new captive manager, or I'm going to find a new broker. And lo and behold, they figured it out. And we're seeing more brokers that are willing to work with the captive managers so that they can keep, the relationship going. There's going to be more of that in the future as we go along.
One thing that we deal with a lot at TrustLayer, we're contractual risk transfer insurtech, right? So we help automate those programs. We pull out your contract requirements and make sure that when we're getting COI or other forms of documentation, that it matches. But one thing that seems to be really heating up for risk managers is treating their third party managers, your craftspeople, your contractors, trying to elevate them both in insurance acumen, right? So risk managers are doing a lot of programs with their third parties to try to help them understand insurance better, but also try to keep them happy and keep programs that put money in their pocket and keep everyone safe on jobs and construction and things like that. What's sort of some of your key ideas on what makes a good third-party relationship with, say, your vendors or your subcontractors?
Yeah, that can be, and it has been a challenge. I'll undoubtedly agree with you on that. And one of the things that I've just really tried to do is just insurance is a relationship-driven business. Okay, everyone in this business knows that. So I try to form those relationships with the vendors so that they'll understand there's hidden liability here, there's hazards, there's things that could arise if you don't have these specific limits. There's a reason why we ask for this. This isn't just because we're being difficult. This is because we're trying to protect us. So I really just try to open up the conversation and make them understand, this is important. This isn't something that needs to be overlooked. And there's always extenuating circumstances, don't get me wrong, but the vast majority, it really just takes maybe an email, phone call, even a text, some sort of conversation to make them understand how important this is.
Also, the ability of having a captive, right? Because a captive can often provide insurance at a cost that they wouldn't have access to. We also see a lot of brokers just writing blank, like, this is what you need, no context of the job or project. So it might even be hard for some of your third parties to get the insurance that you might be requiring in construction, property management, things like that, where there is a lot of nuance and sometimes it's not being handled with a very nuanced program.
Absolutely. No, you're correct about that. I mean, that's going to be risk managers. It's going to be one of our biggest problems that's just not going to go away. But there, with some diligence, I feel, and just with some understanding and even a little bit of empathy, it can go a long way with getting the results that you're looking for that you need to be able to keep going.
Melissa, one last question for you. And you mentioned the advice your father gave you, so you can't use that one again, which is very good advice. What's another piece of advice that you've gotten in your career that you would give to any young person coming into this or anyone that's struggling and asking themselves, am I on the right path?
I guess the other thing that I can say is don't be afraid to fail. I've made so many mistakes and it sounds really obvious, but I've made so many mistakes in my career. But every time I have, or I've had to pivot, or sometimes you just have to say, you know what, I'm sorry, I made a mistake and let me see what I need to do to fix it. Sometimes people just don't want to admit or like to admit when they messed up. But, that can go a long way with some understanding and, some sympathy for you and just to give you the confidence to be able to revisit and try to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, especially when your job is to catch the risks that other people are making, right? There's a little bit of infallibility that is expected or that you feel like is expected when in reality, risk management is a full contact sport where you need to get everyone involved in it. And it's not just your responsibility, it's your focus, but not your responsibility to manage risk for an organization. Last question I have for you. How do you define, when I say risk appetite, how do you define what that means to your organization?
Risk appetite, how do we define it? You know what, to be honest with you, we're still wading through that. As long as we've been around, there hasn't been a real focus on the risk management department until I came along. And so now it's been a situation where I had to go department by department, leader by leader, and ask them, what keeps you up at night? What are you worried about? What concerns you the most, when it comes to our risk here at the organization? Having those conversations is very important. And sometimes it can help you uncover things that you aren't able to see because you're not in their shoes and working their desk. Risk appetite for us, I guess, is being defined by figuring out what are the most pressing matters that they have that they're thinking about, and how does our risk management strategy, our ERM strategy, tie into that? How can it help? So that's kind of how we deal with it at Atlanta Housing. I know everybody has it a little different depending on what they do.
It's a word that I'm so interested in because everybody uses it in the industry, but nobody has a clear definition of what does it mean. Are you keeping a register of what all those are, and you're using that to make decisions? Is it the way you prioritize your work? Is it the way that you report out exposures that you have? It seems to be many different ways that people define that. And so I'm kind of on a mission to sort of work towards a common definition so that we can all kind of understand what they mean. I appreciate you, Melissa. It was a great having you as a guest. I'd love to have you back and talk more about these really important issues that you have going on. I think captives are the way of the future. I think they allow the risk manager and the business that they're working with and businesses that are part of that, I think it allows them to have more control and say about their risk appetite, and also hold one another accountable to some level of standards that sort of are in the black box of broker carrier land. So I think you get a lot more exposure to what actual risks are happening. And maybe they're not for everyone, but I think it's something that everybody should be looking into, especially if you're an organization that can participate in those programs.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Melissa. Have a nice day.
Okay, you too.
Risk Management Brick by Brick is brought to you by TrustLayer. Find out how TrustLayer manages risk so that the people can build the physical world around us. Head over to TrustLayer.io. And then make sure to subscribe to Risk Management Brick by Brick on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. On behalf of the TrustLayer team, thank you for listening.